Welcome back to Personal Financial Planning, Business 140 with Professor Joe Lane. We've completed Chapter 1. I went back and looked. That was about a 43-minute presentation there. I didn't think it was going to be quite that long. But look, Chapters 1 and Chapters 2, those are the foundation chapters for this whole text. So you can figure there's going to be a lot of stuff out there in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. So I think we're off to a good start. I'm going to walk around behind the camera for just a moment. Camera seems to be having a little bit of a problem kind of focusing itself, so hopefully that will it will do that. I hope I'm fairly well focused. I was just looking at the things on the board, but let's go ahead and get into Chapter 2. Now here's what Chapter 2 is all about: developing financial statements and budgets. If you've happened to have had an Accounting 201, balance sheets, profit and loss statements, income statements, this is what we're going to be talking about in Chapter 2. Now, let me say a couple of things about that. Number one, we are not going to become accountants by going through Chapter 2. We're just going to hit the very basics of it, so you'll be able to put together a financial statement on yourself, a basic balance sheet and a income statement on yourself to see how you're doing as far as your personal financial planning is concerned. The other thing is, mini assignment number 1 is you're going to prepare financial goals for me. Remember, we talked about that. When it comes to preparing balance sheets and income statements, I would never ask you, that will not be a mini assignment, to ask you to turn in a balance sheet or an income statement to me, because that has a lot of personal information on it. And of course, personal information is just that, personal. So although I want you to do a balance sheet on yourself, I want you to do an income statement on yourself, it's not something that you'll have to turn in. That would not be proper, so to speak. We said, I was looking at my notes here, financial plans are the roadmaps that show you the way to accomplishing your financial goals. So you start off with those financial goals, but we've got to do those financial plans and strategies that will help us do that. Personal financial statements tell you where you stand financially. How am I doing financially? Hopefully you're doing better as you go along and do personal financial planning. And then after we talk about these balance sheets and the income statement, and I'll probably be talking to the board a good bit, because I may be writing some things on the board in Chapter 2. So if I don't look at you, it's going to be because I'll be working on some things up here. Then we're going to talk, after balance sheet and profit and loss statement, we're going to talk about budgets, and how important budgets are. Okay, let's start off with the balance sheet. I'll put that up here. I'll try to write it large enough. A balance sheet. What does a balance sheet do? A balance sheet basically does this. It tells you your financial position. Your financial position, where you are financially, where you stand financially. And this is important. Your financial position at a given point in time. Okay? So when you do a balance sheet, it would be a balance sheet as of 15 August 2020. So this is your financial position at a particular point in time. And I put that here on your balance sheet. And I think on your study guide, your study notes, I gave you a balance sheet that was in the textbook. Financial position at a given point in time. How much are you worth today? Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty clear now, just making sure that I still wasn't fuzzy as we got into this. Balance sheets have to do with several things. In a balance sheet, it includes assets. So in your balance sheet, you want to include your assets. What are assets? Assets are things that you, ooh, that's bad. We won't use that. We won't use that. Let's try. Let's get that green out of the way. Let's see if there's a better green here, just so I can break up the colors. That's not too bad. Assets are things that you own. Right. These are different. You know, it could be your car, it could be your home, it could be just things that you own. So what you do is you put, and again, you have different types of assets. You have liquid assets like cash in the bank and stuff like that. You know, and then you have investments, which would be maybe stocks or bonds if you happen to have any of that sort of thing. Your real property, cars, vehicles, things like that. Your personal property. So assets, and again, I put a balance sheet on your in your study notes, so you can kind of see how they've broken the assets out. You know, so assets again are anything that you own. So you're gonna, and that little balance sheet that I put in your study guide, that would be, you could kind of use that when you're putting together your own balance sheet. So those are things that you own. Real property would be like a home. Personal property, four-wheeler, stuff like that you may have. Okay, then also you have assets and you have liabilities. You include your liabilities in your balance sheet. Liabilities are things that you owe. So if you have a home, that would be an asset. But if you owe a certain amount of money on that home, that would be a liability. Okay, so you would put your, what you owe. Oh, by the way, on things like homes and stuff like that, what money amount do you put? You put the fair market value for it. What could you get for it? I really do, a 1984 Honda Big Red three-wheeler. You know, back when they used to make three-wheelers. The only place, I used to hunt with it years ago. Now, I have our place, we have a couple of acres where we live, and now my three-wheeler pulls a trailer around in the yard as I'm doing yard work and that sort of thing. So it never leaves the yard, it just has it's in retirement there in my yard. Okay. How much, if I'm going to list my three-wheeler as a personal asset, what am I going to list it for? No, about $10,000. No, that three-wheeler, I don't know, maybe worth $500. So I'm going to list it, you know, maybe I could get $500 for it, $400 for it, I don't know. So you're going to list it at market value. Same thing with your home, your vehicle, that type of thing. You're not sure exactly what it is. Just make a reasonable guess. You know what homes are selling for in your area. You have, look in the newspaper or look online at, what a vehicle kind of like yours would sell for. Okay, just do a reasonable estimate. Now, you're going on your liabilities, the things that you owe, and it should be like what you owe. No, let's take that house again. My house has a market value of $100,000. Okay, and then I look at my bill, that I get from the mortgage I'm paying, and it shows me how much I have left to pay. What's my balance to pay off that loan? Well, that would be how much I owe. Okay, so you have assets, liabilities, and then you have net worth. What you do, you list your assets, you subtract from your assets the things that you own, you subtract from that what you owe. What you have, what is remaining is your net worth. Your financial worth, or in other words I could use for that, is your equity. I hate to keep leaving the camera here. Maybe it's better if I do. But okay, I just want to make sure that we're where you can see it, and it is. I shouldn't go any lower than that. So that's, and it tells you what your net worth is or your equity is. So I want you to be familiar with the fact that a balance sheet gives you your financial position at a given point in time. Could my net worth change if I did this again on the 15th of August or 15th of September? Yeah. So in a balance sheet, your financial position, you state your assets at fair market value. Of course, you know, if you got $100 in the bank, that's $100. That's a fair market value. Then you subtract the liabilities, the things that you owe, and the difference you have is your net worth. I have mentioned a couple of times that I put a copy of a balance sheet in your study guide. As a matter of fact, I think I made this one right here. And now he breaks the assets down a good bit. Liquid assets, those things are like cash and that type of thing. Investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Real property, your primary residence, a camp if you may have it. And then personal property, your automobiles, jewelry, piano, stuff like that. Now, do you have to break it down like this? You don't have to. But it's kind of a nice little breakdown to have. Now liabilities, he breaks it down into current and long-term liabilities. Remember, you're doing this for yourself to see where you are financially. You're not going to turn this into me, but I want you to understand the balance sheet. Current liabilities be your utilities, your credit cards, insurance if you had that. Long-term liabilities would be like the mortgage on your residence, your automobile loan. You know, you don't include any interest in there. You include just what it is that you owe at a particular time. Current liabilities, credit cards. Now, then you subtract your liabilities from your income and you get your net worth. In this particular case, Simon and Megan have a net worth of $87,465. You ever talk about, hey, you know so-and-so is a millionaire? How do you know that? They do a balance sheet. If your net worth is $1 million or more, you are a millionaire. So that's a balance sheet. I want you to be familiar with, one more time, balance sheet, financial position at a given point in time, assets are things that you own, liabilities are things that you owe. You subtract your liabilities from your assets, that is your net worth, that is what you are worth, that is the equity that you have. Okay. Is that okay? All right. Let's do, I'm going to erase this since I don't think I can get two of them up here. Let's do an income statement. Now, they also call it a profit and loss statement. I'm just going to call it an income statement because it's easier to write up here. Could you do a balance sheet on yourself? You really could. It may take a little time to do it the first time to kind of get used to it. But once you get used to it, you know where to pick up the information and everything for it. And you'll be able to do a pretty good balance sheet on yourself to know what your financial position is. Okay, let's look at an income and expense statement or an income statement. Okay, this is your financial performance over time. It is for a period of time. I think I wrote that for you. Income and expense statement, financial performance over time. And you do it on a cash basis. What we earned, where it went. All right. So in a income statement, you're going to have, believe it or not, change code. You're going to have income. Probably not a shock. I think I'll go ahead and turn, because I made you a copy and I put it in your study notes of an income statement. And here is Simon and Megan's income statement. So the first thing that you put on your income statement is, so what is income? It's any kind of money that you receive for whatever purpose. Here on Simon, most of their income is wages and salaries, Simon and Megan's. I see some bonuses and commissions, sales commission. So evidently Simon is a salesperson and he got a commission. Received some interest and some dividends. Excuse me. So income is just that. It's money that has come into you at for a particular period of time. Now let me get that period of time up here. I'm going to say that this is an income statement for the year ended 31 December 2019. You see the difference? This is how did I do financially in 2019. So the first thing we do, we come up with the amount of income that we received from whatever source in 2019. Then we subtract from that the expenses. What expenses did we have? Well, what are expenses? Rent, or your mortgage payment, utilities, clothing, insurance, expenses. Now, this is a pretty nice breakdown. Housing expenses, utilities, food, transportation, medical. How can I keep up with all that? Well, you have to kind of work at doing that. Anything you pay checks for, you're going to have that information. Anything that you use a credit card for, you're going to be able to have that information. You just need to keep up with your expenses. Taxes, clothing, insurance, recreation and entertainment. So you write down all the expenses that you had for this particular time. So you take your expenses, subtract that from your income, and you end up with a cash surplus. Now, what happens if your expenses were greater than your income? You would have a cash deficit. Hopefully, you had a cash surplus. Okay. Now, let's go back. I'm not going to put it up here, but let's go back and think about that balance sheet. Is this an entirely different statement from the balance sheet? Well, yeah. Remember, a balance sheet was your financial position at a given point in time. A balance sheet had your assets minus your liabilities equals your net worth, your owner's equity. So entirely different. And it was for a particular point in time. This is for over a period of time. And this has entirely different stuff. The income you received, the expenses you incurred, and whether you ended up with a cash surplus or a cash deficit. Two entirely different statements. However, does one affect the other? Yes. Let's just say that you have, over the last few years, you've had a very nice cash surplus every year. Well, if that's the case, probably what has your net worth, your equity done? It's probably increased, because you've taken some of that cash surplus and you may have bought an asset with it. You may have put money in the bank, which is a liquid asset. You may have paid some bills, which would reduce your expenses. So if you are running a cash surplus and you're using your cash surplus wisely, then it's going to increase your worth, or in essence, it's showing that you're increasing your wealth. If you have a cash deficit, it's probably going to end up showing, in the form that you have decreased your wealth, because you may have covered that deficit by running up some bills on a credit card, or you may have had to take some money out of savings or something like that. All right. Now, what can you do? What can you do with that cash surplus? Let's go back. I put something on here. It increases your net worth. We said that. We talked about how. You can use it for savings. You can use it for investments. You can acquire assets with it. You can reduce debt, or you can just go out and blow the whole thing. You can just go out and take a vacation for 2 weeks and blow it all. I wouldn't advise that. Not saying that if you shouldn't have a vacation each year. You should budget for that vacation. That should be a part of your your budgeting process. But cash surplus should be used to do something for the most of it. If you want to go out and blow a little of it, that's okay. But most of it to help increase your financial worth or increase your wealth. All right. Using good personal financial statements. Keep good records. The hardest financial statement you'll ever do is the first one. Once you get the first one done, you get an idea of how to do it. You understand how to do it. And you know where to get the information. So please don't not do a financial statement because I don't want to go to the trouble to find that stuff. Once you get it done and you get used to doing it, it makes it really easy. How often should you do one? Yearly? If you want to do it more often than that, that's fine. But do it annually, and it shows how you're doing. Plus, it gives you some great information. Like, for instance, this is where your income is coming from. This shows you, golly, expenses for such, I had no idea I spent that much money for that. That may come up with a red flag that says, maybe I need to not cut back my expenses some on that. Right? So it's good to kind of help you plan as well. Not bad. Keep good records, and then he talks about a couple of ratio analyses. Now, I really don't want to get into ratio analysis, except I'm going to mention a couple. Ratios are where you can take certain numbers in your balance sheet or your income statement, put this number over this number, in a ratio, and it shows you certain things. I'm not going to try to do a ratio analysis, but I'm going to mention 2 ratios you could do. There's something called a liquidity ratio. And I'll write this down here for you. And a debt service ratio. A liquidity ratio, what that does, it shows you or tells you your ability to pay current debt. The debt service ratio shows your ability to pay long-term debt. Okay, let me back up a little bit. I'd like you to be familiar with what an income statement is. It shows you your financial performance over time. It's for a period of time as opposed to a balance sheet that shows you your financial position at a given time. It includes, or what is included in an income statement is income. I want you to be familiar with that. That's all the different ways you receive money for work rendered and that sort of thing. Expenses are simply those things. It's the cost of living. Utilities and medical bills and house payments and that sort of thing. And I want you to be familiar with that, and be familiar with when you subtract your expenses from your income, you're either going to have a cash surplus or cash deficit. Be familiar with the fact that you should utilize that cash surplus to increase your wealth. Save that money, buy assets that, things like that that can help you, or pay down bills. There's ways that you can manipulate. You can use your income statement and your balance sheet to show how well you're doing financially. Two ratios that you can do, and it's a liquidity ratio, which is your ability to pay current debt, and your debt service ratio, the ability to pay long-term debt. I'd be familiar with that. So I think that's what I would be familiar with. And again, if you look at Simon and Megan, they had $86,000 in income, they had $65,000 in expenses, so they had a cash surplus of $21,000. That's pretty good cash surplus. They could certainly increase their wealth and their net worth, their equity, by having any bills, they could pay those bills, by having any, or they could be increasing their revenue. I'm looking through here at some of the things that they have paid. Maybe if there could be, I see a loan payment, some things like this. They could maybe pay those things off and decrease their expenses. Okay, all right. So that's income statement and a balance sheet. Now, let's talk a little bit about budgets. Oh my gosh, budget. Any of y'all do budgets? Any of y'all actually do a budget for yourself? You have a family budget or a personal budget? Budgeting is, we talked about you've got to develop plans and strategies, and you have to implement plans and strategies. And one of the ways when you come up with those plans and strategies, one of the ways to make sure that you actually do them is to make a budget and make them a part of your budget. Let me say this about these things. These income statements and balance sheets, they are actual numbers. They are real numbers. Because what you're doing is you are actually recording stuff that has already happened. Now, a budget, on the other hand, income statements, balance sheet and income statements, you're looking backwards. I'm looking at stuff that's already happening and I'm writing it down. A budget, on the other hand, looks forward. You are budgeting, you're looking into the future. Why do I utilize budgets? I utilize budgets to do planning, and then once I use budgets in my planning, when I put my budget into effect and I operate under that budget, I'm using it for control. Now, when you put together a budget, what can help you to do that? How should we do that? Okay. First of all, remember those financial statements? I'm sure you do, we just finished them. Those financial statements, especially that income statement, it told you expenses that you have, right? Okay. When you're doing a budget, let me find it. In your budget, you are going to budget your income. Kind of sounds like a financial profit and loss statement or an income statement. But remember, an income statement, you're looking at stuff in the past. Budget, you're projecting into the future. I think planning, now that I look at that, I think planning has two ends. If I haven't told you I'm a bad speller, I am. I'm not proud of it, but sometimes it happens. I think I got that straightened out. Okay, an income is all the income you expect to receive. And budgets are normally done on a yearly basis. They kind of coincide with your short-term financial objectives. Short-term financial objectives for about a year or for a year period of time. budgets should be done yearly, and then you can break it down monthly if you want to. And basically, you also do budgets on a cash basis. It's what you're actually going to get, what you're actually going to receive. Okay. So, well, let's not get to those folks' budget. We'll get that in just a minute. Expenses. I'll use this. Expenses are the actual expenses that you feel like you're going to have in this year. You know, list whatever your expenses are going to be. I said here, prepare by using actual expenses from the previous year plus short-term financial goals. What is that all about? Here's what I'm saying. Your income, do the very best you can to estimate what your income is going to be for the coming year. You got to be, you know, if you're not accurate on your income, now are you going to be exact? No. You want to have the better you can estimate correctly, the better your budget's going to work for you. So, well, you know, I was thinking about maybe sometime I'd get another job and a part-time job in the evening, and I think I may make about $10,000 on that other job. I'm going to put $10,000 up here as part of my income. No. You've been sort of maybe thinking about you would, that's not what you want. You want income that you pretty much figure are going to be there, that you're going to receive. All right. Now, expenses, we talked about where do expenses come from? Okay, if you go back to that, that is sad. If you go back to that income statement, remember the expenses that you had in an income statement? Some of your expenses were your house note or your rent. Some of your expenses were your utilities, maybe car insurance, food. Okay, are you going to have those expenses next year? Well, yeah. So a number of your expenses, you're going to be able to look at your financial statements and determine. Okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to give up on red. You can look at your financial statements, and that can help you a lot in determining your expenses. Plus, financial goals. Remember those short-term financial goals or intermediate or long-term? You may have certain short-term financial or long-term intermediate financial goals that you've got to also take into consideration when you're looking at your expenses. I need to buy that new set of tires. So I'm going to budget so much in here for those tires. I'm going to set aside a certain amount of money as a tire expense that I'm going to pay at some point. So you see what you've done here is you're looking at your expenses based upon your financial statements. You know these expenses are going to continue, you know, unless you paid something off. But also you're looking at your short-term, intermediate, and long-term financial goals, and you're saying, okay, what kind of money do I need to do those things? I'm at that as well. So all of a sudden when it comes time for me to pay for those tires, it's not like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I've already set aside part of my income as an expense for tires. How about vacation? I want to take a vacation next summer. I can put a vacation in here and save money for that. Okay, so you've got your income, you've got your expenses. Then you're going to end up either with a budget surplus or a budget deficit. You do not want to end up with a budget deficit. Because remember, a budget is looking forward basically on how you're going to spend your money. After you've gone through this year, and you do that, it becomes an income statement because it's actual. So if your expenses are greater than your income, what do you need to do? You need to adjust your expenses or adjust your income realistically. Do something to figure out a way to realistically increase your income, or do something to be able to realistically decrease your expenses. Because you certainly want to have at least a break-even budget. It'd be great to have a surplus, because that surplus we talked about, we could use that surplus, if that comes to be, to pay down debt, to buy assets, to set aside an emergency fund, whatever it is that you want to do. I put on your handout, I do want you to be familiar with, obviously, what a budget is. A budget is estimated income and expenses into the future. It's a financial projection into the future. I wonder what our author said of a budget was. Let's see if I can find it. Takes into account estimated monthly cash receipts and cash expenses for the coming year. You're looking forward, and what you're trying to do, as you're putting together your budget, you're basically planning for the next year. Remember those we talked about developing strategies and plans? Well, that's what you're doing here. You're developing plans for your finances for the next year, and you're putting it in, instead of writing it out, you're putting it in budgetary form. So I could look at your budget and I could tell what your financial plans are for the next year. All right. And then once you do the budget, the worst thing you can do is sit the budget up on the shelf and say, forget that. I've done it, but I'm not going to use it. After you've gone through and you've planned with your budget, then you put it into control. You actually live within that budget. You do everything you can to live within that budget. I think at one point I was going to tell you that what budgets are. It's a financial future projections of your income and your expenses. You prepare it on a cash basis. Income is all the revenue, all the money you're going to receive for work and that type of thing. Expenses are the expenses that you incur in living, a cash surplus or a cash deficit. And you don't want a deficit. You want at least to break even, good to have a surplus. Now, I did put down here dealing with a deficit. What if you went through your budget and you ended up with a deficit? You're just working on it. And you put in all your income, you put in all your expenses, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, my expenses are greater than my income. What can I do? Number one, liquidate savings and investments or borrow. No, you don't want to do that. What you're saying is, basically, I'm planning on living beyond my means next year, and I'm going to take part of my assets, probably my liquid assets, or I'm going to incur some debt to be able to allow me to do that. So what that does is, what does that do to your net worth? It decreases it. Okay. Number two, cut low priority expenses. That's a great idea. Let's go back and look at these expenses, and let's cut those that are not necessary. Or you really might try to increase your income. Or there's some things that I can do to increase my income. Really, really do, that I may do. But work on that budget until you at least have it balanced. A surplus is good if you can do that. Let's look at, I wish you were in here with me, and I'm hoping this is working okay this way. Here, now this is a crazy budget. I shouldn't have said that. Detailed budget. Here's old Simon and Megan's budget. And I made a copy of it for you, and you should have it with you in your study guide. Okay, their budget, I'm going to go over here to the far right-hand side. And their income for the year, they projected at $63,250. They projected their expenses as $62,527. Wow. And so their surplus is $723. So they have almost a break-even budget. Then what they did is they broke their budget down monthly. They have the yearly budget, but they broke it down on a monthly basis. And if you happen to be looking at this, there's some of their expenses we know they have to pay. Their rent on their home, their mortgage is $1,185 a year, if you happen to be looking at that. They've made some estimations for clothing. And you can notice that every month is not the same. Some months are larger than others. Fund money. They just set aside some money to go to the movie, do things like this. Savings and investments. Now look at this. They're saving $575 a month, or $6,900. What are they saving that for? Probably for some financial goals. You see? You see how that works? Recreation and entertainment. Boy, they've got a big recreation and entertainment in March of $3,200. I bet they're taking a vacation. But instead of just taking a vacation and saying, how are we going to pay for this? Let's get the credit cards out. They've budgeted for their vacation. Okay. All right. I think I gave you a second budget. I think I showed you as well. I showed you this little monthly budget. Now here's what they've done. What I showed you at first was simply their budget for each month. Now what they've done is they've come up and they have put that budget into place. So if you look at this, take-home pay for some particular month, I don't think it tells me what month it was, $4,800. They actually took home $4,817. They had a variance of $17. They got more money they took home than they thought. And then here, see, they have what their budget is for all their expenses, and then how much they actually spent. Recreation and entertainment, they budgeted $250. They spent $210, so they're $40 to the good. So this way, you're using that budget for a control device. You're making sure that you are living within that budget. And if something happens and throws some area of your budget out, what do you need to do? You need to revise that budget to be able to stay within that budget and accomplish those financial goals and objectives that you're trying to accomplish. All right. Okay, we have knocked out budgets. I love budgets. I would do a course in budget preparation and use planning and control. Because as a chief financial officer for years and years and years, I prepared a ton of budgets, and I always enjoyed doing those. All right, time value of money. A part of expenditures in a budget, some money is going to be saved. Because you're saving that money for those tires, you're saving that money for vacation, you're saving that money for retirement, you're saving that money for the down payment on a car, on a house. So a part of your expenses are going to be savings. You're going to take some of that money and you're going to spend it into a savings account. Does that make sense? That's the idea. Okay. I'm a personal financial planner. Congratulations. I don't save. You're not a personal financial planner. But I do not. If you're not saving, you're not doing personal financial planning. Because if you have financial goals, you have to save for those financial goals. And if you're not, it means you either don't have financial goals or you have absolutely no chance of meeting those financial goals or accomplishing them. So expenses to savings, saving money is a part of personal financial planning. Okay, how am I going to save that money? I can put it in a mattress. I can bury it in the backyard. I can put it in a box. Now you know where I'm going with this, don't you? When you save money, what do you want that money to do? You want it to grow. You want it to get more bigger. Now we've got 3 or 4 chapters on investments, and we haven't hit investments yet. But we just want to talk about the time value of money. put this on almost like a little sheet for you. And this is a no item in chapter 2. So far, most all the items in chapter 2 have been be familiar with items. Income and expense statement, be familiar with what that is, be familiar with what income is, be familiar with what expenses are. Cash surplus, be familiar with what a cash surplus or a cash deficit is. Be familiar with what you can do with a cash surplus. Increase your net worth, use for savings. Be familiar with the fact that you need to keep good records. Be familiar with those two ratio analysis. We did that. And then in budgeting, we talked about be familiar with what a budget is. It's for planning and control. That a budget includes income, it includes expenses. You're either going to end up with a budget surplus, a budget deficit, or a break-even budget. If you have deficit, a budget, it tells you the things that you can do to get rid of that budget deficit. Remember now, budgeting is in the future. These are estimates. Time value of money. This is a no item. The concept that $1 today is worth more than $1 received in the future. Let me look at this two ways. Professor Lane, I'm going to give you $100. I'll give it to you now, or I'll give it to you in a year when you want it. Now. Why? Because I want to be able to use it. I may spend it, but if you're just nice enough to give me $100, I may save that $100 for one of my financial goals. And what I'd like for that dollar to grow. So that dollar is worth more today. The concept that $1 today is worth more than $1 received in the future. So I'd rather have that dollar today so I can put it to use in the future. Now, this is just free. This is just extra. But we're going to get to something else later on. You can pay for something now, or you can pay for something in a year. When would you like to pay for it? I'll do it in a year. Have you ever seen sometimes where they offer these things 12 months no interest, and maybe minimum payments, or no payments for a year, no payments for 90 days? Okay. You want to take advantage of that? Sure. Yeah, I'd much rather, if I want to pay for it now, I want to pay for it later. If it's not going to cost me anything, I'll pay for it later. I don't care when you pay for it. You can pay for it now, you can pay for it later. I'll do it later. Now, if I have to pay interest on it, that's a whole different story. I don't do that. Unless I have to, unless it's a long-term type of purchase. So I want you to know what the time value of money is. The concept that $1 today is worth more than $1 received in the future. Okay, we're going to look at that in two different ways. And I'm going to do my very best to finish up this chapter and not confuse you. When you're looking at the time value of money, I'm going to get a refund on this dry erase. I think this is brand new. When I'm looking at the time value of money, $1 today is worth more than $1 received in the future, because I can use that dollar. All right. There's two things that I want us to be able to illustrate. If you look at your handout, you'll see something that says the future value of a single amount. Now don't leave me, don't throw up your hands, don't go try to find the computer and drop the course. This is one of the most detailed things we'll do in the whole course. It's not hard, you just got to pay attention. Okay. The future, I want to look at the future value of a single amount. There's also a future value of annuities. Don't even think about that. I just want to show the point here. The future value of a single amount. the value to which an amount will grow if it earns a specific rate of interest over a given period. Why money has a time value, why it's better to receive something now, a dollar now, than in the future, is that you can take that money, invest it, and it will grow. So I did a little calculation here. Future value. You have $10,000 to invest for 8 years at 5% interest. I have $10,000. I'm going to invest that $10,000 for 8 years. I'm going to put it in savings. I'm going to put it in something for 8 years. I'm going to put it in a mutual fund. I'm going to put it in a stock. Don't worry about just the fact I'm going to invest it. We'll talk about the different investments later. And I think that I can earn 5% interest. I think I can earn 5% interest. What's that money? What's the future value of that $10,000? I gave you in your study guide at the very back of this text, if you have the text, but if you don't, again, I put it in your study guide. There is an Appendix A, future value. So I'm looking at this table because it's a whole lot easier to do this than to try to calculate it. Table of future value factors. I go over here and I say, okay, it's 8 years at 5%. I go down here to 8 years, I go over to 5%, and there's a factor of 1.477. So there's a future value factor of 1.477. I go back here, future value. Amount invested times the future value factor. I have found the future value factor, 1.477. For me to find out the future value of that $10,000, I take that $10,000 and I multiply it times 1.477. And magically in my head, I come up with the answer of $14,770. Also written on the sheet. That's the future value of a single amount. Now what does that say? I mean, just what is that really saying? That's really saying, if I take $10,000 and I invest that for 8 years at 5% interest, I get $14,770. My $10,000 has grown to this amount. So you say, well, why is that important? Well, one of the reasons future values are important and you also can do it for an annuity. An annuity means if you invest so much money each month or whatever, what it will grow to. It's the same idea. The calculations are a little more difficult, and I don't want to go there. I just want to show you the basic idea. I'm getting ready to buy a new home, and I want to pay 20% down. I'm going to buy a $200,000 home, and I want to pay 20% down. That's my financial goal, is to buy a new home and pay 20% down. 20% is $40,000. So does that mean that I'm going to have to, and I'm going to buy that house in 8 years or 10 years, it's whatever I'm going to do. Does that mean that I'm going to have $40,000 that I'm going to have to set aside to be able to buy that, to do that $40,000 down payment? No, it isn't. It means that if I start saving and investing now, I can take that money that I'm saving and investing, and it can grow. So I can calculate, what that money is going to grow to. what my investments are going to grow to. All right. So let me back up. If you're still in a dead panic, let me back up. Time value of money. I want you to know that. The concept of that $1 today is worth more than $1 received in the future. You'd rather have the $1 today than in the future because you can make it grow. Okay? Then I want you to be able to calculate the future value of a single amount. I want you to be able to calculate, if I give you the amount of money, if I give you how long I'm going to invest it some kind of way, and what I think the interest rate is going to be, I want you to be able to calculate what I'm going to end up with as far as the money. Now, you've got this right here, very easy to do. The future value is equal to the amount invested. So I'm going to give you the amount that's invested. The amount that's invested is $10,000 times the future value factor. The future value factor is what you look up in Appendix A. And you have a copy of Appendix A. Future value, Appendix A. And what we found when we looked down there, 8 years and went over to 5%, 1.477. So that money is going to grow to $14,770. That's a good thing. All right. That's future value. What is this going to look like out, given how many years I'm going to invest it and at what rate I think I'm going to be able to get? Now, if I'm wrong about either one of these, it'll change, but this is my best estimate. And it'll help me to make sure I have money for certain financial, my money grows, that's going to help me to take care of and handle some of these intermediate and long-term goals. Now, here's the other one I want you to look at. Present value. This is not what an amount is going to grow to. Look at what it says. Present value. The value today of an amount to be received in the future. The present value of something to be received in the future. Let's look at this. Present value equals future value times the present value factor. Say, uh-oh, you lost me. Well, let's just look at the example. What amount would I need to deposit today to have $250,000 in 15 years at 5% interest? Now you see I'm looking at it the other way. When you're looking at future value, if I have this amount of money right here, and I invest it some way for so many years, how much am I going to have over here? That's future value stuff. Present value says to have this amount of money over here, how much am I going to have to invest for a given period of time at a given interest rate? What amount would I need to deposit today to have $250,000 in 15 years? I want $250,000 over here for that down payment on something 15 years from now. And I'm going to, I think I can invest it at 5% interest. You go in here, and you've already got it. This should be coming clearer and clearer for you now. You go over here to Appendix C, because it's a different appendix. Appendix C, table of present value factors. So what did I say that we had? 15 years at 5% interest. 15 years, 5% interest, 0.481. Just looking it up in the column, 0.481. This was 15 years, 5%. So I take $250,000, and I multiply that times 0.481, and I get $120,250. So what does that tell me? That tells me if I need $250,000 in 15 years, how much would I have to invest today if I could get a 5% interest rate? I would have to invest $120,250. That amount would grow to $250,000 in 15 years. The time value of money. That's what we're looking at. Now, does that kind of, I hope that sort of kind of makes sense to you. When we do a test, the no is, I want you to know what the time value of money is. So I'm going to ask you some kind of way, explain to me or define for me the time value of money. A dollar received today is worth more than a dollar received in the future. Time gives money the opportunity to increase. Time value. So make sure you give me that definition. Then I'm going to say, I'm going to give you a single amount present value calculation. I'm going to give you a single amount future value calculation. If you have $10,000 to invest for 8 years at 5% interest, what will it grow to? You have to do a future value calculation. If I'm asking you what will it become later on, that's future value. If I'm asking you what a future amount, what would it take to have that future amount in the present, that's the present value. I want you to be able to do those two calculations. Obviously, I have to give you the amount, I have to give you the interest rate, I have to give you the years. But the reason I'm doing these calculations is it helps you when you're looking at intermediate and long-term financial plans. Because it shows you how much your money will grow to, or it shows you how much money you need in the present to do something in the future. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay, it gets a little bit deep, and if you're thinking, oh my gosh, is this what we're going to be doing the whole rest of the semester? The answer is no. This is the only time we'll be doing any kind of calculations like this. But it's just, you have to be able to understand how you have, the whole idea behind investing is making money work for you. And when you make money work for you, it helps you to be able to accomplish your financial goals. I think that's pretty, well, that should be enough, huh? I think that's chapter 2 for us. Now chapter 1, chapter 2, a couple of heavy chapters. Wait till we get to chapter 3. I'm gonna move my chair back, I'm gonna sit down, and we're just gonna cruise through chapter 3. It's gonna be not nearly as heavy as these first two, but you've learned a lot of stuff. You've learned what personal financial planning is. You've learned the steps in personal financial planning. You've learned the importance of financial goals. You've learned how to do financial statements on yourself. You've learned how you can use those financial statements and your financial goals to prepare budgets for yourself. And you understand that money has a value. And you're able to calculate basically the value of money in the future and the future value of money in the present value. All right, I think that takes care of chapter 2. Thank you. I'm going to take a short break, get my makeup artist to come and take care of me, and then I'm going to probably come back in just a few minutes, and I'm going to knock out chapter 3 for you. My loud clap for Professor Pierce. Thank you for hanging in here in a good chapter 2, and we'll be headed to chapter 3.